A war is justified if you're willing to send your kids. Because how can you send somebody else's kids to a war if you won't send your own? So I'm calling right now for Barron Trump. Donald Trump's on, after all, he's had 3 wives, he's had kids by each wife, and nobody's ever served in the military. To my knowledge, a Trump in the last 100 years has never done military service. Well, Barron, you can change that. Enlist in the United States military right now. Do something your father didn't have the courage to do. Do something your father didn't have the patriotism to do. I want to see a Trump in the military. Everybody in my family has served, so I think I can say that with all due confidence. Come on, Trumps. Don't just reap the benefits of this free world. Somebody put on the uniform, and that's you, Barron. And I heard the excuse that Barron might be too tall. David Robinson served on active duty. He was 7 feet tall before he ever went to the San Antonio Spurs basketball team. David Robinson went to the United States Navy Military Academy. He's one of my officers, not directly, but he would have been. What I feel bad about was that if he'd have joined us in Vietnam, we might have won, huh?
No.
He could have put us. Why did he run and hide when he could have joined us and led us to victory?
I don't think anything would have changed the fortunes of the United States in that war.
Yeah, probably not, considered he called us all suckers, didn't he?
What would you say to Trump if you had a chance to speak to him?
I'd prefer not to speak with him. I don't have really. What would I say to him?
I don't know.
He's. To me, he has no courage. He never has. I'll tell you what he is, Piers. Everybody knows these people. You're with a group of guys, and there's always one guy who will start the fight and then hold your coat. That's Donald Trump. He'll start the fight, but he'll hold your coat. You know what I've always said? You know how you got to vote to go to war, supposedly? I've always said we should pass a law that when Congress votes to go to war, someone in their immediate family has to begin immediate military service. If they vote yes to go to war, then someone in their family, because I'm sick and tired of the Vietnam stuff.
It's not just Jesse Ventura who wants to see Barron Trump drafted into the military.
You can miss me with that bullshit. If I get drafted into a war with Iran because this big-bellied orange bitch decided to start a war with them, you can send my ass straight to prison. I'm not going. I will be draft dodging just like our president did. Motherfucker got drafted 5 times and didn't go to war once. And honestly, the only way you would ever catch me out on that battlefield is if that pot-belly pig was on the front lines. Like, I'm not joking.
Former South Park writer Toby Morton created a website called draftbarrontrump.com. And at the top, it says the following. America is strong because its leaders are strong. President Trump proves that every day. Naturally, his son Barron is more than ready to defend the country his father so boldly commands. Service is honor, strength is inherited. Dog bless America. Out of all the promises that Donald Trump has broken from his 2024 campaign and really his whole political career, this war in Iran is definitely the biggest one, because the bottom line is there's no easy way out of this, and there's no way for America to just pull out anytime soon. We have too many assets over there, and we're basically controlled by the state of Israel. And so as long as Israel wants us there, that's where we're going to stay. The Strait of Hormuz isn't going to open anytime soon, and Donald Trump continues to come out and say that we're in negotiations with Iran, and Iran retorts by saying, no, we absolutely are not in negotiations with the United States. And at the end of the day, they can't trust us. They can't trust our word. If we say that if you come here, we'll do a ceasefire, it's likely that we won't do that. We'll lure them in, trick them into signing some type of contract, and then we'll break it. That's what the United States does, particularly under Donald Trump. Iran was already following the nuclear agreement. They weren't enriching their uranium, and then Donald Trump came into office and broke up that agreement simply because Obama had it in place. And now it's clearly obvious that he's in completely over his head. So the fact that we're even talking about a draft is a clear sign that this is spiraling out of control. And like Jesse says, and like everybody's suggesting, if anybody has to get drafted, why not send your own people?
A new report from the leading think tank, RUSI. Are you SI, is warning that the UK needs to be prepared to mobilise for war. The report's author has also said a conscription plan has to be considered, even if it's not currently necessary. Paul O'Neill wants Britain's army to double in size to around 150,000 troops. So does that mean we should bring back conscription right now? Emma?
I don't think this report is calling for us to bring back conscription immediately. In fact, it makes the point that actually we probably couldn't do it immediately. What they're talking about is building up our capacity to actually, be in the position to defend ourselves. So I think we should be working towards increasing the size of the army. There's another study out this week that suggests that only 50% of young people are willing to fight for their country. Yeah. So if it comes to it and we need to conscript people in order to make sure that we have enough people in our armed forces, then absolutely we should do it. But I don't think that we need to be doing it immediately. And I think actually what we should be doing is maybe we should do something like a kind of intermediary voluntary service for people who are coming straight out of sixth form college before they go to university, like some other countries do, in order to give people those skills as reservists, so that if they need to be called up, they can be.
Well, what do you think, Bobby? Because this is urgent now, isn't it? Yeah, we've got. If you put the army in Wembley, you've got about a quarter of the seats are empty.
Mm-hmm. I mean, geopolitically, obviously, there's a serious threat right now, but anything like military conscription, even the word of it just makes me squirm, because that is not a serious solution, whether it's now 5 years, 10 years, because ultimately modern defense is built on highly trained professional forces by people that want to be there. And again, we have advanced technology. Anything that's rushed recruiting people, again, we've got stats that half of young people would never take up arms for Britain. That does not work. And again, if there are concerns about readiness, we think about, again, investing, we think about retention of people, capability, but even the word conscription, that's just a policy from a bygone era. If people don't want to...
Well, they say it should be considered.
Well, that's...
Roosters say it should be considered.
I don't think it's considered at all.
No.
If people do not want to fight for their country, that is their choice.
Ooh.
No, I mean, mandatory military service is already common in a lot of other countries, particularly countries that are at risk, places like Israel. But also, if you just look at what happened in Ukraine, the only way that they could defend themselves against Russia was to conscript people. The idea that this is something from a bygone era is just untrue. It can't be the case, that I think it's a terrible shame that only 50% of young people want to defend their country or would be willing to take up arms. I think part of this is because we've constantly denigrated our country, and we were talking about patriotism earlier. People don't feel that there is anything that they love to defend. But ultimately, if this is what we need in order to defend our country, this is what we need to do. It's not some antiquated thing.
Does a young person have the right to say, I don't want to fight for my country because I don't fancy it?
One of the most British things is the right to say no. Again, why is voting not mandatory? Even though probably, again, I think on the whole you should vote. But in Britain, we allow, as a liberal democracy, people the right to say...
But in a time of war, you can't say no.
But again, the nature of warfare has changed. We're not World War I, World War II, where there's technology, there's drones.
In Ukraine, it's not the case. It's boots on the ground.
I guess the nature of Ukraine is they are on a land border with Russia. Russia can come over across. They've got people, Russian citizens within the country. We are a different beast of a country.
OK. Bob in Manchester, what do you think? Conscript young people.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
All right, Bob. How you doing?
First thing is, my old regiment, the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, was formed today on St George's Day 1968, so a shout to them because they'll be having a parade today.
Thank you.
Right. Conscription. No, I'm not a fan. I'm a former regular soldier. I am not in favour of this. I don't think it would work. There would be massive pushback against it. Now, go and have a look at young people today. Look at a lot of them. They can't dress themselves. They don't know whether they're boys, whether they're girls, or something in between from one day to the next. Do you really want to trust them with a rifle? Because I wouldn't.
That's a bit harsh. I mean, you've described a certain small number of people who may have gender confusion or whatever. That doesn't mean we can't get an army together.
Well, it'll never happen, mate.
So basically Gen Z can't fight, is what you're saying?
I would, not just them, quite a lot of others wouldn't either. You'd find that most people that are in favour of this are going to be people that wouldn't actually have to do it.
Well, that's a good point. It's people, armchair generals, as they say.
Yeah,
Thank you,
right.
Bob. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bill in Surrey, what do you think of what Bob said?
Well, I'm actually. I'm going to go outside. Hold on. I'm actually here to talk about something a little bit different, really.
Oh, are you? Oh, it's nice to have you on the show.
Well, it's conscription, but also to do with the boat people. I personally would conscript all these young lads that are coming over in boats. I would conscript them into a sort of an army.
Yeah.
No guns, and to be trained by all our veterans that are homeless, out of work, and get them to do that. Let them do 4 or 5 years, and then if they've been good boys all that time, then you give them British citizenship. If they're not good boys, you send them back.
So would they be war ready? Because if you're not going to give them any weapons,
no,
I don't know where you'd send them.
No, they wouldn't be war ready.
Oh, so they're not soldiers.
When you look at it's just a conscription in a different way. If you don't know whether you've been watching Michael Portillo in Japan.
No.
When you see the streets and everything is spotlessly clean, this country's a disgrace. You get these boys out on the streets, you get them cleaning graffiti, picking up litter, bringing the country back.
Okay, conscript them into something, some forced
public
labour,
service,
forced public service. Yeah, how about that?
I mean, it's not a bad idea to having, if people are going to be here put up at public expense, to have them going and doing something that is, serves the community. I mean, the idea of conscripting them into an army, I think, would be an absolutely terrible idea. But I just want to say, I think that Bob is right, that there is a concern that young people, in an army, you want the soldiers to be willing, and you don't want them to be soft. I think a lot of us, having lived in a time of peace for so long, have become quite soft.
Yeah, you probably are soft, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I don't see fights in pubs now that I saw in the 70s or the 80s.
And football hooliganism, on the whole, has gone down compared to the 80s.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah, but you do need to be able to defend your country, and that is. If you look at the numbers, I mean, over 150 at the end of the 150,000 at the end of the Cold War, down to around 70,000. As you say, you can fit them in Wembley Stadium
easily. I think Wembley's 100,000.
It's absolutely terrifying, and something needs to be done.
Let's just get another. I think, by the way, we've got some pictures of Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, has been in Ukraine. So here he is, Boris in the kill zone, the ex-PM's extraordinarily vivid dispatch. This is written for the Mail. I think he's doing something for Channel 5 as well, actually. So he's out there in different places, looking at the effects of the war. And he did actually do an article, I don't know if we got it, where he says Boris Johnson reporting for duty. Have you got that headline? No. So it's where he says, I'll find it in a second. Lance Corporal Boris Johnson reporting for duty. In other words, he, at the age of 60, would be up for joining and pounding the exercise square. But I don't know if they would want him.
No, I mean, this man spends far too long trying to ruffle his hair to look unkempt as part of his image. I think he would not be the right person for our military.
Okay, yeah. But he believes in some sort of conscription. We've got to get the army numbers up. And it may be that we don't have enough willing volunteers. I'm amazed when I watch, sport on Sky, for example. It seems the Premier League seems to be sponsored
constantly
by the army.
Yeah.
But is it surprising when in public life, our country is constantly being denigrated? It makes people not want to fight for and defend their country. And this is why I say patriotism is extremely important. It's a healthy thing, and we need to be able to defend our country. And as this report shows, we are in a really, really bad way, and it's dangerous.
Kevin in Glasgow, hi.
Hi there, Jeremy. How are you doing?
What about really well, thank you. And at 60, I guess I'm not going to be the target conscribee here. But would you conscript people or not?
No, I would not. If we get into a situation where we needed a bigger army, I'm quite sure all the veterans would volunteer. Voluntary. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's a good point.
Because we've got thousands and thousands of veterans in Scotland and throughout the whole of the UK. There's your army there. But if you start conscripting people, you'd have to different religions, and then a lot of them would say no, or they would join and maybe learn how to use weapons and turn them against us. So we've got to be very careful how we approach this. But we're not in a bad situation, so there's no need to conscript people.
Well, there is that thought that it might be that the military people, the RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, is full of, really impressive ex-military, but they are war-minded. And it might be, Kevin, that military people are always planning for war, and the rest of us are looking, thinking there's not a problem here. We've got an ocean. We are not involved in Ukraine directly. We've stayed out of Iran. Where's the threat? Am I being too complacent? Where's the threat?
Exactly,
I don't get it.
Jeremy. If we ever have got into a war, right? I mean, I'll be 70 next month, and the way I see it is, if they say to me, I still consider myself fairly fit, I would join up.
I'd be prepared to operate a drone or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I don't know if there's going to be a front line in the old-fashioned. I don't know if there's going to be a front line in the old-fashioned way at all, Bobby. In this.
No, again, because technology's advanced so much, we don't need as many soldiers.
We may never have parachutists again, for example. I don't know, but we just are entering an entirely different realm.
But again, I think in economics, we just need to make it financially more lucrative for people that consider the military. So again, I watch Premier League football and I see pretty much every ad break, like, join the reserve. And they make it kind of seem cool, but I think they should also say about, here's the financial packages, here's the pension that we provide.
Yeah.
Because then young people, if they see a career that can actually give them something financially sensible, they may be tempted.
Let's go talk to her. Thanks, Kevin. Emily in Lancashire's on the line. Hi, Emily.
Hello, Jeremy. How are you doing?
All right, thank you. Interesting one as to whether we should just basically scoop up about 40,000, 50,000 people under 25 and say, in the words of status quo, you're in the army now.
No, I'd love to join the army, but my mental health would bar me from service. I've tried multiple times; it just won't let me join.
So, what barred you from serving?
PTSD.
Oh, you've got PTSD from something else.
Yeah, that's an unrelated topic. But, however, I feel that younger people my age should join the army. I feel like they should.
And what age are you, Emily?
I'm 28.
And what made you want to join the army yourself?
Because I just want a sense of belonging. I've always wanted to join at a young age, from the age of 18. I feel like younger people my age should get interested in the army because it gives them a trade later on in life.
So I think those are all good reasons. I don't know.
Emily, legend, absolutely.
But a sense of belonging might, that's lovely. It might not be a reason to fight. That's all I'm thinking.
Well,
We've got two Emilys here.
Well, I think...
Emily.
I think young people should be interested in joining the army. I know young people who have joined the reserves, and I think, it's not just about people joining the army. Obviously, we need to get the numbers up dramatically. It's also about things like, how many guns do we have? You would be shocked by how few big artillery guns we have. It's about the industry that is needed to actually fight a war, to build that industry up and that capability up. And so I really think, and with the greatest respect, I think the argument that, we're not in that situation yet and we don't need to worry about these things and that the people at RUSI are just military minded, I actually think that that's a dangerously naive attitude to have when you see Russian ships coming through the channel and whatnot.
Well, we're under attack already. World War III has already started.
We're in a soft war.
Yeah, we are. Huel is in Pembrokeshire. Huel, hello.
Hello.
Huel as in Huel, as in the protein drink.
As in the Welsh HYWEL.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That'd be Howell, wouldn't it, or not? How would you say it?
No. West Wales, South West Wales, it's Huel.
Of course. Sorry, Huel.
I think it's the Irish influence sometimes.
Of course. What would you like to say, Huel?
Well, it's just that, I joined the army in the 60s, and training conscripts is a very labour-intensive job.
Yeah.
We've got an army that's barely capable of defending Kent, to be absolutely honest.
Well, one of the generals said it couldn't even take a small market town, our army. And that sounds terrific.
It's true. Oh. And as soon as we pulled the army out of BAOR, off the Rhine, and concentrated on the Middle East, the Russians saw that we were not worried about them, and of course we are in a position where we haven't got the soldiers to do anything. We need, if we're going to train people train people who are conscripts, we need a lot of people.
Yeah, well, we need another half an army at least, don't we? We've got 70. We need another 35,000. But I mean, part of being a conscript is getting fit, and I don't even know if that would be quite basic, Huel.
Yeah, well, the things you need to be as a soldier is, first of all, able to obey orders. You have to learn how to march and your basic weapons and things like that.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do the basic things so that you react instinctively to what you're being asked to do.
Yeah.
And it's a very complicated, long process.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh. That's a great, very sage comment from your years of experience. Thank you. Later, it's the papers and everything else. Find out why the head of the Met Police has waded into the row about another sacked supermarket worker who tried to tackle a thief. After the break, we're asking, is it okay to spend millions helping toads cross a road? Okay, it's 0207 862 2222. We'll see you shortly.
On the headlines here, I haven't seen the story. But is that true that half of young Britons say they wouldn't fight in the country?
Let me find you that
what
story.
Piece of research was that? What was the basis of it?
Story. Hang on a minute. Let me just.
And by the way, we should name those that wouldn't fight.
Yeah, you got the Mail there, page 11, Daily Mail.
Page 11, Daily Mail. Here we go. Half of young Britons would refuse to.
Yeah.
Half of under 30s would not fight for their country under any circumstances, a poll has revealed.
Yeah.
We should put a note in their window, right, which says we wouldn't fight for that. So can you imagine Putin sitting there reading the old Mail?
Yeah, right.
There's a good one here. He said, we'll be all right, we'll take on the UK. This lack of enthusiasm to take up arms has been blamed on rife job insecurity and unstable housing market and financial worries for young people, meaning they don't feel Britain cares about them. Yeah, you're right. We certainly don't care about people who won't fight for us.
Yeah.
The worrying statistic comes as the army has just 73,000 regular soldiers in its ranks, down from 150,000 in 1990. Only a quarter of 2,000 16 to 19-year-olds surveyed believe they are fairly treated by the political system.
I mean, really?
I'm going to do a Luke
Can you imagine that in
I'm going to do a Luke Littler.
Yeah.
Hey.
Can you imagine that in 1914? No, sorry, I don't fancy that.
Or in 39 or 45, and we said, look, Hitler, who wants to slaughter all Jews and wants to basically run the country, is coming across the channel very shortly. Would you like to fight? No, I wouldn't.
No, I know.
Right. What do you do under those circumstances? Do you lock them up? Because
yes,
that's what did happen.
Well, or you offer them the chance which people used to do back in the sort of, certainly the Second World War in Vietnam. A conscientious objector. All right, you don't want to fight, but you now have to go and work as a paramedic or some kind of medical person. You have to be part of the struggle. If you don't want to be a soldier, that's fine, but you have to be signed up to do some kind of national service of some kind, I think. Because then you find out they're just frightened and they're just cowards.
Yes, look, we all would be, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Because the way you get killed these days is by drones. It's not because somebody's coming round the corner. Yeah. So I do understand that, and it's all right for me to say, because as anybody would say when they were looking at you, they would say, your days of fighting are over. Actually, do you know what? I don't believe that. For instance, I'm not retired. I've got one business in the US now, and I've got another one starting over here, right?
You could shoot a sniper rifle.
Yeah, you could even do it, or you could drive an ambulance, or you could do something. You could make some contribution.
Yeah.
So although it may be, what's that one?
Talk them to death, he said.
Or I could bore them to death.
Yeah, right.
No, that's it. I could do what they do at the DMZ between North and South Korea.
Tonsio.
Go back, or I'll force you to listen to the Mike Graham show 24 hours a day.
Exactly right. But I mean, funnily enough, you would have been the editor of The Sun, I suppose, during the Falklands. Yeah. I was willing to, I was about early 20s. I was ready to sign up
No, not you a goose green.
I was so enthused by the Sun's coverage of it that I thought, I've quite fancied a bit of this.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends were the same. Yeah. And we didn't think we would because we were all a bit lefty in those days, you know. But I went, no, I'm going to go and save the Falklands from the Argies. Because
you know what? It would have taken a very big boat to take you there.
It would have done, yeah. And as David Letterman said, he said, I never understood the Brits. He said, you know, they said to the Argies, he said, right, we're declaring war on you. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Anyway, listen, that's the end of the show. We're going to switch over now to the new station, UK Live, which is, I'm happy to report, the second biggest YouTube breakfast show in Britain. Obviously after this one, which is the first biggest breakfast show in Britain.
No,
they don't have a view.
They've lost it. They have completely lost it.
I mean, I don't normally do this, right? Normally I do this at The Guardian. But I'm now going to tear up The Sun because it's literally crap. I'm sorry. You know? I'm sorry. Would you mind having a view on life? What's the point of it otherwise?
No, but what's happening is they're killing their own value. And the reason they don't do it, by the way, is because they don't want to get on the wrong side.
So they're on the wrong side of anyone, right?
But so they're in the unique position now of having a failing company, right? But they don't want to fall out with the Prime Minister because these people like Brooks and Co. and Murdoch like getting the invites to Number 10. They like all his life. Murdoch has there has been a red carpet. Australia, UK, US towards whoever's in power. Right? They don't want to lose it.
Well, because it suits their business. I don't mind that. That's fine. I mean,
why don't they announce that?
Well, because they don't want to look as if they're toadies, right?
That is the reality. He says himself, I want politicians. Actually, he's wrong now. He's completely wrong. You haven't got any leverage. Or if you have got leverage, why don't you explain to your reader / listener / viewer what that leverage is? Right. Why is it that I can't even say on a catastrophic day for a Prime Minister and for a government why it is I don't say either they should go or take my view, he should stay.
Well, if you were there right now, editing it, you would go to the leader writer, whoever it was, it might be David Wooding these days, you'd say, look, like, let's take a stand here, right? Either, you know, this bullying of Keir Starmer must stop. You know, he's done his best. He's doing the best thing he can for the country. He's stood up as the great, you know, instigator of world peace. You know, look at what he's done for the NHS. Fantastic. Keep him here. Or say, keep him here because it's better if we keep him where we can see him and because we don't want anybody else in charge. Or say, time to bugger off. You wouldn't sit there and go, right, this leader, which starts off with 3 paragraphs about what we actually already know. Bollocks, isn't it? Sorry.
Well, I presume, I have no idea what motivates them. And actually, whatever does motivate them commercially doesn't work anyway. No. So they have when I was there, right, it was literally, honestly, it was a cash machine. It was making 4 and 5 million a week, right? And the cash flow would have been more like 6, 7.
And also that's immediate money as well, isn't it? You know, you're not waiting for it. It's coming in every day. It's coming in
every week, by the way. Every week. Right, today it's lost, I think in the last year it lost 50 odd million quid, which is unbelievable, by the way, to lose money. And the quality of, they don't really believe in anything. They believe in survival. Murdoch has said, I will carry on funding a loss-making company, but don't cause me trouble as well. Okay? Well, actually, the whole point of media is causing trouble. It's either doing what the Sunday Times does to Richard Tice, which is basically pursuing the guy, right? That's journalism. Fine, I get that. Painful for Richard, but that is what it is. Or it's doing what I would do with the Sun, which is the complete reverse, which is we'd be a total scandal sheet. And I put it behind a paywall so that no advertiser or for instance, their sales director, or he's now their kind of managing director, would say, "Don't run that story, mate," because honestly, Sainsbury's have just taken out a 1-year contract worth 6.5 million with us, and you've just pointed out that their lamb chops, actually, most of them are bad and come from.
Well, they're halal or something, right? Halal lamb. We got to go to Nigel Evans. He'll have a view on this actually.
Before the break, we asked which music artist fan base are known as the Navy. Is it Beyonce, Adele, or Rihanna? And the answer is Rihanna. Apparently because she starred in a 2012 movie adaptation of the board game Battleship. That's a great bit of trivia. Never noticed that film. Welcome back. Paul and Annunziata are with us. Paul's first time on the show. Are you enjoying it?
I'm enjoying it, yeah.
Good,
yeah. Hopefully the people at home are enjoying it. Who knows?
I'm sure. Later is the papers and everything else, and find out why arm wrestling could be the next big thing in the world of sport. Let's get on to our next topic. Are young people unpatriotic? 0207 862 2222. Half of people aged 16 to 29 have said they would not go to war for Britain under any circumstances. That's according to a survey by Glasgow University. Does that mean Gen Z has lost national pride? Annunziata.
I think there is, undoubtedly, going by this study, there is a decrease in how strongly people support their country. They still think that overall we're a tolerant country, that there are things to be proud of. But I think this has been a sort of generational undermining, where not only have we seemed ashamed of our history and our culture, but also that for the first time, this generation really don't expect to be better off than their parents.
Well, that's true. And that's true all over the world, actually, yeah.
But that really diminishes how strongly and enthusiastically you feel about your country and where it can enable you to go.
Can you explain it, Paul?
I think that is actually at the heart of the issue. I mean, it's a bit of a weird question, isn't it? Equating, do you want to go to war with, are you patriotic? But, you know, when you've got a quarter of young people who feel that the political system doesn't work for them, that we know young people are disproportionately likely to be in insecure, low-paid employment, are going to struggle to get onto the housing ladder, are looking ahead and thinking, I'm not going to be working until 67, 68, I'm going to be working until 70, 71, 72, and beyond. You can see why people are frustrated and feeling that politics and politicians aren't reflecting the issues that matter to them. I would say, though, that patriotism to me is more than, you know, can you sing all however many verses of God Save the King and wave a Union Jack? For me, patriotism's always been about looking after the people you live alongside, being proud of the place that you're from. And quite often those who shout loudest about patriotism are people who are anything but patriots. I mean, you know, Nigel Farage will say he's a patriot and then cheerleads on Donald Trump when he slaps on tariffs on UK manufacturing. Richard Tice seems to have an aversion to paying taxes that would pay for public services that millions of his fellow citizens rely on, but would call himself a patriot.
Is that right? And if you, like Farage, if you put the flag behind you, you're probably less patriotic.
Oh, well, the Keir Starmer does it the entire time. He's got his 2 Union Jacks on perma display. I think that the false flag waving is just really irritating. But I think occasions like yesterday when we celebrated, the Royals celebrated the Queen's 100th birthday. I think St George's Day, I think that the jubilees we had in the Queen's lifetime, where villages and streets come together and have an event. I think you're right. A lot of our patriotism is about community. And I think there is a lot of isolation in our country at the moment that makes people not feel as connected to each other or the country.
Let's talk to John in East Yorkshire. Hi, John.
Good morning.
Can you explain this? Gen Z just don't feel like we're worth fighting for?
No, I can't explain it, to be honest, but I agree with both the panel members there. I wouldn't want my son or daughter to go, that's for sure. I've got 4 great uncles buried in France, 3 in the Somme, 1 in the Ardennes. 2 of them, the brothers, died within 3 days of each other, and that was about 180 years ago. None of them owned land or a house. They were poor. So let those with the most to lose go first, if they need to. What a waste of human life! It's too easy for madmen to send our children to the deaths.
But what if we were invaded? I mean, you know, at some point you have to pick up arms, don't you?
Well, maybe. Put those at the front that've got the most to lose, and those that with the least to lose with nothing at the back, and then okay.
Yeah, I don't know whether the logic of that. What someone spent their whole life working and working and working, and they become a multimillionaire, and you put them into, they'd probably be happy to go into warfare.
That's fine.
Yeah, all right.
I think John raises a really important point, that do we actually want to conscript, for want of a better word, hundreds of thousands, millions of young people into an armed forces? No, I don't think we do. And I don't think the army chiefs would want us to either. That they want an elite, effective force. For modern warfare, it's not about people. But should there be...
I don't know about that. Look at Ukraine. They need the boots on the ground there.
We're not very likely to have a massive land war on our shores.
And can I also just pick up directly John's point, because I think it's a really important point, John. My family story is a little bit different than yours, I suspect, but my granddad came to this country during the Second World War from Poland, obviously fleeing in the face of... He was part of the Polish RAF. Right. They got to Casablanca, actually, and were told you can either go to the US, which at that point wasn't in the war, or you could come to the UK and help in the war effort. And he decided to come to the UK, and he worked in a plane factory and played his part in the fight against fascism. But there was someone who came from Poland who was incredibly proud of this country and the contribution he'd made to this country. And sometimes in the debate around migration, for example, we lose the fact that you don't have to have a family line that goes back 4 or 5 generations to be proud of Britain and the contribution you made to this country. There are lots of people who make that contribution in different ways. And I think, having tolerance for the people that we live and work alongside, every local council now doesn't matter where in the country, funding is on a knife edge. You're struggling to provide basic statutory services. But now it's grown up, things like having the flower beds in the local park were a source of civic pride.
But
and we've lost some of that.
But that's because, it's just all money, isn't it? We've got to pay, the council's got to pay for old people's homes. And we understand that. And, it's painful to see them losing libraries is a real agony with so many.
Collectively, we all have to ask ourselves, how do we recover that sort of sense of civic pride? And how do we make sure that those with the broader shoulders pay a fair share?
Or we all do voluntary work or something.
We could have a scheme. We've also got the highest youth unemployment. We've overtaken Europe for the first time ever, and it seems to be rocketing. But I think we could have a youth scheme that has nothing to do with the military. I think for the military, you do want people who want to be soldiers, who want to be there, conscripting unhappy people wouldn't work. But you could have a scheme where they could do flower beds, but to give them a purpose, give them a
if you're Gen Z
structure.
and you're forced to do a flower bed, you're not going to feel more patriotic. You're just going to want to move to Spain.
There's a serious point, though. I mean, the government has introduced a youth jobs guarantee for long-term unemployed young people. It's a really good start, I think, proper, meaningful work for people. But it needs to be at scale, and it needs to be decent quality work that people can build a life.
All right, let's just go to Jane in. Whereabouts in Devon, Jane?
Good morning, darling. I'm in Devon.
Yeah, whereabouts?
In Exeter at the moment.
Oh, brilliant. So, what do you think? Are Gen Z less patriotic, or is that being unfair to them?
I don't think it's being unfair, but I've got a very simple notion on this one. I think it's inevitable because of social media. They've got too many other distractions.
Yeah, that's true, because back in the day, we all had to sit and watch TV with our parents, and we watched Bruce
Whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and you did have very sense of Morecambe and Wise and Dick Emery and Bruce Forsyth and the Queen. Now, you're right, you turn on your phone, you're all over the world.
Well, my 2 children had to grow up listening to Queen and Freddie Mercury. They haven't come out too bad.
Well, that's the other form of Queen. You're right. Thank you, Jane, so much. After the break, it's the papers and everything else, including the lifetime smoking ban for young people that's just been agreed by Parliament. Is that fair? We'll see you very shortly.
Ladies and gents, how you doing? This one is going viral again on X for some reason. I believe I talked about this last year because I think the original story went round via the Daily Mail about a year ago. I'll look into that in a moment. But the short version is a lot of people are pushing this around on X, pointing out that there was a recent youth poll of 2,000 people aged 16 to 29, and they found 50% of them wouldn't defend the country under any circumstances at all. Optimism has plunged too, with just 36% expecting to outpace the parents financially, which is halved since last year. Well, it's going to have, isn't it? Because we've had an absolute log like Rachel Reeves running the show. Oh, sorry, Rachel Reeves.
She's a spastic.
Yeah, of course, you're skint. The Chancellor of the Exchequer has had the financial acumen of a chicken McNugget for the last 2 years. Of course you're skint. And then experts like Eddie Barnes has apparently pointed to low wages and debt, asking why fight for a country that feels unresponsive, and military recruitment is still saw an uptick from unemployed youth despite the gloom. Well, a lot of people on X are responding in the way you might expect, which is, patriotic people who are clutching at straws, desperately trying to explain this. This fella, for example, Hugh Anthony, said that's because a ton of them aren't British, and the British ones don't want to fight for a land which no longer represents our people. All conflicts we're involved in are over foreign land, and they create more problems here. We are in a terrible position. Well, Hugh's right there, but I would dispute the first half of that sentence. I don't think it's because a ton of them aren't British. I genuinely think it's because if you are British and you can see who's running the country and who they are running the country for and whose interests you would be fighting for, I'd argue that you don't have to be an African to not want to fight for Britain. I did 5 tours. I was a bootneck for nearly 10 years. I was in the Green Howards when I was a teenager because I joined the TA first. I was always a military man. I'd have definitely been a 22-year guy, if they were prosecuting my fellow brothers in arms. I put my chit in shortly before Al Blackman got charged for first-degree murder for having the temerity to defend himself when a Taliban fighter was unloading an AK-47 in his general direction. So yeah, don't tell me that it's only Africans that are worried about fighting for the UK, because this 5-tour veteran is here to tell you why he wouldn't do it either. And if you've got any sense, you'll tell the kids to go and work in a corn factory before they'll go and pick up a rifle and march off to war at the behest of Keir Starmer and his paymasters. But maybe you just think I'm being a wanker, so let me elucidate further. Right, I've done a bit of digging. The main story is the Daily Mail's doing what the Daily Mail does, and they've rehashed the same data 2 or 3 times. It isn't brand new data, it's just gone viral again. The story hit the mainstream media last year on multiple occasions, and the numbers are changing depending on what you read. Some people say nearly half of British respondents would refuse to fight for the country. In some of them, it's as high as 2/3 of them. So what's the score, eh? Let's have a read, and I'll give you my thoughts. I've done you a solid, and I'm avoiding the Daily Mail like the plague, because there's more adverts on that than you see in one of those prosy telephone booths in Soho or something. It's actually unbelievable trying to navigate the Daily Mail website. So we're reading it here off World Journalism. I believe it's a reproduction of the Daily Mail one, though. Nearly half of respondents would refuse to fight for the country. It says this is following on from an Ipsos poll on British national defence released Tuesday, and shows that 48% of the Brits surveyed wouldn't take up arms for the country under any circumstances. The poll came out 2 days before the 80th anniversary of VE Day. Of the 1,090 people polled online, those of ages 35 to 54 were the least likely age group to fight for their country, with 54% against it. The poll also found that 57% of women would not fight for their country for any reason, and results were fairly even across voters from different parties. Just over half of the respondents were confident Britain's armed forces could adequately defend the country. Yeah, have you seen the state of our navy? We couldn't even get one boat out when we needed it. Under the last 4 or 5 governments, they have gutted the UK military. It's an international embarrassment. The Royal Navy at this point is just a rusty bathtub with a flag on it. So, if it's all the same to you, I think I'll stay home as well, thanks. Apparently, the survey also found that respondents were more likely to want a defence relationship with the European Union or NATO than with America. Can you believe that? That's how complete the conditioning has been on the last generation. I never thought I'd see the day when red-blooded Englishmen would prefer to go to war with a Frenchman in charge. Think of that. I've been on multinational exercises with the French. It's impossible to get a French soldier to do any work. All they do is smoke and masturbate. At least the Americans love a bit of a ruck. Anyone who's ever worked with the Americans knows we've got more in common with them than anybody else. We speak the same language, for Christ's sake. I mean, I almost criticise the Americans' grasp of English there, but a man from Middlesbrough really doesn't want to throw any stones when he's in that glass house. And Queen Natalie here started talking about it. I follow, she's all right, but she said half were probably immigrants or the children of immigrants. I don't think so. I don't think people that pay attention, born and raised in the UK, people, I don't think people who pay attention would want to fight for their own country at this point. Why would you? Why would you? Any capital that our politicians had, they used up when they lied, possibly shuffled David Kelly off the mortal coil, lied some more, and then had us invade Iraq. I went twice on a totally fake premise that they had WMDs and Saddam was sitting on a load of anthrax and mustard gas, when in actual fact, you'd probably find more lethal pathogens at the back of the fridge in your average Indian restaurant. I'm going to make a video about that subject shortly, by the way, because I've read some appalling stories this week. In the meantime, don't go to an Indian restaurant. Do yourself a favour. So yeah, that's why nobody wants to join up. They've used up all the capital. Tobias Ellwood and all the rest of the wankers in Parliament. Johnny Mercer. That slithering, slippery little shit cans. All the veterans in Parliament are scum, let alone the normal politicians. Would you risk your life and limb fighting for Tobias Ellwood and Johnny Mercer? Are you having a laugh? There were no WMDs in Iraq. They lied to us. Multiple British lads gave their lives in the sands of Afghanistan for nothing, for no reason. We toughed it out until it was politically inconvenient. A good mate of mine died after he was supposed to go on leave and he volunteered to stay put because he wanted to take part in the attack on Musakala. Got killed doing it. And then a couple of years later, we just handed over the Taliban anyway. And then on top of that, you've got this fiasco in Ukraine where nobody knows what the hell's going on there. Like they're using the British army as paid mercenaries for big banks or some shit, and money laundering, international globalist money laundering. And then since these polls came out, it's got even worse because we've had multiple stories in the last few weeks that SAS lad in Australia getting busted, where the media's gone out and paid lying Afghans to make shit up about him. And then another one, which I read today, that one, it was on Talk TV and it was all over the place, about SAS soldiers quitting the job in significant numbers in fear of witch hunts from human rights lawyers. Starmer's mates, they're all at it. Ambulance chasing lawyers, chasing after veterans everywhere from Northern Ireland, Iraq and Afghanistan, and even further back. Frankly, at this point, I'm astounded they haven't pulled anyone over the coals because of casualties in Korea. There's bound to be someone left alive from the 1950s, isn't there? Starmer will go at them, hammer and tongs. So are people like Natalie and Isabel Oakeshott and these people saying, oh, it must just be all the foreigners. I would ask you to give your head a serious shake. Also, they're both birds. Funny old thing. Doesn't tend to be them that get the legs blown off on the front line, does it? But you get what I'm saying? Is the list long enough? If I'd have made this video 2 years ago, I did make one a couple of years ago, saying if you've got any sense, you wouldn't fight for the British military. But it's got worse since then. After debacles in Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, high-profile witch hunts against British veterans in Northern Ireland and Afghanistan, endless ambulance-chasing, thieving, lying lawyers, and then only this week, now the SAS lads are all quitting because they know they're next on the chopping block. How can anybody who pays attention to what's going on in the world sit there with a straight face and say, oh, it's all just foreigners, it's all foreigners? No, it isn't. The boys from the Mersey and the Thames and the Tyne are paying attention and they know that their government lies to them and sides with the enemy, and that's what they do. And that's what they did when I was in Afghanistan, and that's why I put my chit in and quit. And I was very sagacious, wasn't I? Because shortly after I did that, Al Blackman got charged with murder and prosecuted worse than they'd do if you came home from work, caught the postman shagging your missus, and then killed him with a cricket bat in your spare bedroom. It's a truly ludicrous state of affairs. No wonder nobody's joining the military. Oh yeah, let's throw in some zany ethnic recruiting ads as well. You've seen the one with the bloke on his magic carpet praying while the rest of the section keeps watch for him. It's the perfect storm. I can tell you 200 good reasons not to go into the military and only one to go in, which would be camaraderie with your fellow working class oiks. But that's just what I think. You think it's a good idea going in the military in 2026? I'm assuming you walk around 24/7 with a sandbag stapled to your head, so you'll have to get somebody else to type the comment for you. But please do your best down below. All right, thanks for tuning in. See you all soon. Toodle pip. Cheers.
Poland just said the quiet part out loud. After 3 decades of professional volunteer recruitment being the European default, Warsaw's defense ministry briefed parliament this week that conscription is coming back, not as a distant possibility, not as a working paper, but as a concrete legislative proposal for 2027. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron opened the door to extending the French nuclear umbrella across NATO. Rheinmetall signed a major new ballistic missile joint venture, Germany's AfD tabled a motion demanding full American troop withdrawal, and the British Prime Minister shelved the Chagos Islands transfer because Washington pulled back. None of these stories are cosmetic. All of them point in one direction. Europe is building something new, and the bill is coming to ordinary households faster than anyone expected. Let's walk through it. Start in Warsaw. The Polish Defense Ministry briefed Parliament that a volunteer recruitment target of 120,000 new soldiers for 2027 is unlikely to be met without mandatory service for men aged 18 to 23. The proposal is not yet law, but the political preparation is unmistakable. The government has started public information campaigns explaining what a return to conscription would look like. Basic service would be 9 months, with optional extensions for specialist training. Exemptions would cover sole earners, university students enrolled by a specific date, and medical categories. For Polish families, this is the most concrete defense policy shift in a generation. It also sets a precedent. Germany, France, and the Netherlands all have conscription options on paper, suspended for decades. If Warsaw reactivates, expect Berlin to follow within 12 months. European defense manpower cannot reach the minimum 500,000 additional trained personnel required by new NATO plans through volunteer recruitment alone. The generation that thought conscription was a museum piece is about to discover otherwise. Polish opposition parties are already running focus groups on how to vote on the bill without alienating either pro-defense voters or younger parents. Kiewa. If independent analysis of European affairs is useful to you, smash the like button and subscribe. Every view through to the end, every comment, every share pushes this kind of calm reporting up the algorithm. Tell me in the comments whether conscription should return in your country or whether you think professional volunteer forces can still deliver the numbers NATO needs. Share this video with someone who assumed the draft was a museum piece. Second thread, Paris. Macron's statement was technical in form, historic in substance. France holds a fully autonomous nuclear arsenal. Britain technically has one, but its Trident system depends on American engineering and logistics. Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Italy host American warheads under the NATO nuclear sharing arrangement, but they have no independent control. If the United States formally or informally pulls back from NATO, those arrangements collapse. Macron's offer, still vague in procedural detail, is that Paris is willing to talk about extending French deterrence to Berlin, Warsaw, and The Hague. Command and control, targeting authority, warhead positioning, all of it. Technical negotiations start this autumn. The political signal is already sent. Europe's nuclear future will be French-led, not American-led. For capitals that spent 3 decades underinvesting in defense because the American umbrella was free, this is both a relief and a massive new bill. France expects rapid counterpart investment. Warsaw and Berlin are already quietly expanding their contribution formulas inside joint staff structures. Third thread, Rheinmetall. The German defense group just signed a major joint venture with a Dutch aerospace firm to produce cruise missiles and ballistic artillery systems. The numbers behind this matter. European defense spending is now committed at approximately €1 trillion over the next decade. The European Commission has mandated that at least 80% of that trillion must be spent on European contractors, not American. American defense manufacturers are watching that spending drain away in real time. Internal lobbying of the White House has been intense, and leaks to Politico confirm the State Department pushed back. It will not be enough. The European procurement rules are already written into member state budgets through 2030. Rheinmetall's order book alone now exceeds the entire Pentagon procurement for some categories. This is not abstract industrial policy. It is the largest realignment of Western defense production since the formation of NATO itself. German engineers are being hired back from American firms, Italian contractors are opening new Rhine facilities, and Polish steel mills are quietly signing multi-year contracts. Fourth thread, Germany's AfD. The parliamentary group just tabled a formal motion demanding the withdrawal of all American troops from German soil. The motion will not pass the Bundestag in its current form, but it forces a vote, and it forces every other party to publicly state its position on the American military presence, which is politically uncomfortable for the CDU and the SPD, both of whom have avoided the question for 2 years. The FD argument is not isolationist in the old sense. Their position is that Germany should host no foreign troops it does not fully control. Whether you agree with their politics or not, the motion pushes the Overton window of what is debatable. Combined with Macron's nuclear offer and the Rheinmetall expansion, the German public debate is shifting in one direction. Less American dependence, more European autonomy. That debate is still bounded, but it is no longer marginal. Fifth thread. The British Chagos Islands transfer is dead. London opened talks under the previous Conservative government to transfer Chagos sovereignty to Mauritius, while leasing Diego Garcia for 99 years. The deal required American consent under a 1966 exchange of letters. Donald Trump called the plan an act of great stupidity, and Keir Starmer quietly shelved it, rather than force a public confrontation. The International Court of Justice risk remains live, which means London is exposed to possible future binding action. Mauritius has lost 3 years of good faith negotiation. Port Louis will remember this humiliation for a generation. For European watchers, the lesson is sharp. American consent is still required for even the most minor Anglosphere sovereign adjustments, and that consent is now unreliable. Every European capital is drawing the same conclusion at the same pace. Plan for a future where Washington cannot be counted on, and that is precisely what Macron, Rheinmetall, Warsaw, and even the AfD are all, in their different ways, doing right now. Thanks for watching. Through the end. If this kind of analysis is what you want more of, drop a like, leave a comment, and share with a friend who still thinks Washington dictates the European agenda. Every like, every comment, every share pushes independent reporting further up the recommendations against the corporate news machines. Putting together a clean script, cross-checking every date, and verifying every quote takes hours of real work. Your support through subscriptions and the Super Thanks tip jar keeps this channel independent without sponsored spin. Tell me in the comments which country you want covered next. We make the independent European space stronger together. See you in the next one.
Europe has a defence problem. Well, actually, Europe's got lots and lots of defence problems, but there's one that might be more important than any of the others. In a rapidly changing world, Europe is trying to drag itself into a military and strategic renaissance, rebuilding armies, regaining power, and trying to remember what it feels like to actually throw a bit of weight around. But Europe needs a leader, and with the United States scoffing at its transatlantic allies, it's become clear Uncle Sam isn't going to do the job. Europe's defence alliance needs the strength to stand on its own, and it needs the vision to know what it wants to be and what it wants to fight for. Somebody's got to make that decision, meaning that someone, somewhere across Europe, has to rise to the occasion. The future of the continent hangs in the balance, and there's no time left to waste. So, let's play a little game. Take a pause, have a little think, and work out the country that you think is best equipped to lead Europe into the future.
A few moments later.
You got your answer? Well, good work, but no matter the country you choose, we regret to inform you that you chose wrong. Congratulations, every European nation, except the one you chose, believes that your choice of leader simply isn't up to the task, and now they're going to put a new committee together and write you a strongly worded statement to that effect. The sad reality is this: at a moment when Europe desperately needs a leader, its inability to actually choose a leader goes far deeper than you might have imagined. So here are all the nations that could conceivably lead the continent, and all the reasons that Europe won't accept any of them. Most people don't realise how much of their personal information is just sitting online until they actually look for it. Names, addresses, phone numbers, random profiles, it's all just seemingly out there, and you're like, why? That's my data. Why is it being bought and sold by data brokers? That's no fun. This is basically, your data being out there is basically how scams and identity theft usually start. That's basically the problem Incogni's trying to solve. It's a service that automatically removes your personal data from data brokers and people's search sites. Instead of manually emailing hundreds of websites and repeating the process over and over, it just handles it in the background. But the part that's actually new, and way more useful, is their custom removals feature. Because you see, not everything lives in those standard databases, although a lot does. By the way, it's like hundreds of them. Sometimes your info shows up on a random site, but with custom removals, you can just copy the link to that site, paste it into your Incogni dashboard, and their privacy team will go and get it removed for you. So it's not limited to a fixed list anymore. It's basically just anything you can find. And that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? If they can't find you, they can't harm you. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Use the code WARFRONTS at the link below, and you'll get 60% off an annual plan. That's incogni.com/warfronts. The bodge job. As we dive into this European tour de force of bad options, we should clarify one thing at the start. Some of Europe's current leaders are making waves on defence, whether nation by nation or as part of the European Union or the NATO alliance. We'll be talking about a few of those leaders specifically as we go through this episode, and when we don't mention individual leaders by name, it's generally because we will be talking about the broader political situation that prevents them from being truly effective. But in general, we're going to focus our conversation on countries rather than individuals. In the world of defence, national policies and decades-long initiatives tend to matter much more than any government leader, and considering that European capitals are a constantly revolving door, we really can't expect any specific European leader to even be relevant in a couple of years. So as we start to pull European nations from the pile, we'll start with the United Kingdom, a nation with a historical reputation for considerable military might and one of the continent's better win-loss records in modern wars. Today's British military is renowned for its quality of training and discipline, as well as its technological sophistication. It's one of the militaries that's been most proactive in its efforts to modernize, and it's picked up global experience in the 21st century under the auspices of the War on Terror and elsewhere. Britain possesses a blue water navy, a highly capable air force, and its own nuclear arsenal. Its strategic minds are some of the world's best and brightest, and its special operators earn constant praise from their international peers. Geopolitically, Britain is highly influential across the globe. It's a member of the Five Eyes Alliance, a founding member of NATO, and the closest global ally of the world's wealthiest and most powerful nation, the United States. But unfortunately for the United Kingdom, it's highly unlikely to gain the trust of its European allies as a continental leader, not least because Britain spent the last decade telling Europe that it didn't want to be a part of Europe. While the rest of the continent doesn't hold Britain's current leaders responsible for Brexit or all the tension and upheaval that came before and after, Europe still understands that it's wise to hold Britain at an arm's length. Britain's commitment to Europe is still in question, and influential European voices regularly question Britain's long-term vision, both as a part of the continent and as a sovereign nation. Britain has lots of money, it's got lots of defence expertise, but it's not clear what Britain actually wants to do with itself, and if Britain doesn't have a clear strategic vision for its future, then Europe can't trust that it won't turn its back on the continent in the future. And then there are the myriad of other reasons that Britain just isn't equipped to lead Europe on defence. It's going to be a recurring theme for this episode that if a nation can't get its own military together, then it's probably not a great option for everybody else to follow, and unfortunately, Britain is a fantastic example of just why that matters. For one thing, the British Armed Forces are not a large organisation, just 137,000 active duty personnel and about 32,000 reservists. The country is struggling mightily to recruit new troops, and its army in particular has more than halved in size since the end of the Cold War. The British public has become quite disillusioned with both its military institutions and the mission they serve, with a broken recruitment process and endemic quality of life issues driving potential new soldiers away, and with just 11% of Gen Z adults willing to fight for their country, according to a poll from February of 2025. The British Navy, once the stuff of legend is badly atrophied, up to 2/3 of the fleet needs maintenance at any given time, it's constantly losing personnel, and it's not clear that it would even be able to protect the English Channel in a time of conflict. Politically, Britain is hardly in a position to lead any international body right now. The country's two main political parties are each in a state of progressive collapse, but rising alternatives have yet to gain a real foothold, especially on the international stage. And while the British military has been militarizing in a conventional sense, its leadership has done a very poor job adapting to changing times. Europe needs a leader that understands how quickly the world of warfare is changing, and even if Britain has learned that lesson academically, it hasn't put its findings into practice. Sacre bleu, please not you. From Britain, we turn to Europe's other nuclear power, France, where on paper the French have a somewhat stronger mandate to lead the continent than the British. Unlike the UK, France is a member of the European Union, and it possesses the second largest peacetime military of the entire continent, after recently being overtaken by Poland. Like Britain, France boasts one of the world's largest economies, while it boasts air and sea components to its nuclear deterrent, as opposed to Britain's complete reliance on submarines. The French military is the most technologically sophisticated of the entire EU, and it possesses several key hallmarks of a true military power: its own aircraft carrier and blue water navy, indigenously produced advanced fighter aircraft, main main battle tanks, mobile howitzers, and more, and a defence industrial base that goes beyond most of its European counterparts. Like the UK, France is relatively experienced in operations abroad, but unlike the UK, France has gone abroad and managed its own foreign expeditions very recently. In an overall sense, the nations of Europe clearly must trust France on diplomacy, defence, and foreign policy in a way that doesn't carry through to Britain. But the fact that France is a better option doesn't mean it's a good option. For France, the biggest problems are largely political, economic, and diplomatic, not least the fact that Paris is staring down the barrel of a major debt crisis. Over the last year, it's become obvious that France is in dire financial straits, with the international community now preparing for stopgap measures up to and including an IMF bailout, something that should be unthinkable for a country in France's position. The reason that a bailout isn't unthinkable is that France's money troubles go hand in hand with the political crisis rotating through governments faster than a wheel of French cheese rotates after you've shoved it down the side of the Louvre pyramid. Regardless of any of France's strengths, those crises alone might be immediately prohibitive, as the country's European counterparts recognize that a country dealing with those sorts of problems just isn't fit for a leadership role. And with that, France's current leader, Emmanuel Macron, has hardly more than a year left in office as of the time of writing. Currently, the only thing that seems assured about French politics is that Macron's chosen successor will not receive a warm welcome from the French electorate, and Jordan Bardella of the hard-right National Rally seems on track to win, meaning that France could start moving in a very different direction for its future, both on defence and otherwise. And then there are all the problems that have a bit more to do with the French military, because in France's case, a strong military isn't necessarily a trustworthy one. For one thing, France carries a lot of baggage from its recent expeditions abroad. In Africa's Sahel region, France left such a poor impression that several regional governments looked at Russia's Wagner group and thought to themselves, yeah, those guys seem better, and then proceeded to usher in a worsening security crisis that better French conduct could have avoided. But France in charge of a European defensive alliance, and France's reputation will generalise onto its partners. Not only that, but France has a long-standing history of treating, quote, European defence as a thinly veiled pretext to pursue its own interests and then demand European endorsement. It's hardly a secret across Europe that in France's eyes, French interests always come first, and it's not hard to see how the decision to sign up for a French-led European defence order would just doom the rest of Europe to eternal place as second fiddle. Finally, France suffers from a problem that sounds like it should be an advantage. France, more than any other European nation, is making the case that it deserves to lead Europe through the battles to come. But rather than inspiring confidence from other nations across the continent, France has only drawn skepticism and mistrust. The response is much less, hey France, thanks for stepping up, and much more, dude, it's weird how much you want this. Don't be weird. The worst choice. From France, it's time to discuss the idea that Germany could lead all of Europe to war, and while we imagine that you can already see one problem with that idea, we'll first lay out the affirmative case for Germany before getting to the drawbacks. Berlin manages the world's third largest economy behind only the United States and China, and over the last few decades it's been hailed as one of the rightful leaders of the grand European experiment. Germany has guided EU politics and economics for many years, and while its inflexibility, its tendency toward hesitation, and its outsized influence has often drawn criticism, European leaders generally regard Germany as an asset in its current position instead of a liability. The country's manufacturing sector is one of Europe's strongest, and as a result, it's poised to become Europe's defense industrial base after a few years of reform. Like France, Germany produces all sorts of indigenously developed military equipment, especially for its land forces, and it's geographically central, able to weigh in on the defense issues faced by both Western Europe and the continent's eastern flank against Russia. Germany's newest group of leaders have shown themselves to be very interested in defense and remilitarization, and they've pushed hard for a pragmatic rethink of Germany's place in European strategy, including as a staging area for a future continental war against Russia. On the other hand, well, this is Germany, and Germany's track record in Europe across the 20th century speaks for itself. This is the nation that tried to lead a conquest of Europe twice within a 30-year period, failed both times, literally perpetrated the Holocaust, and was otherwise a driving force behind two of the biggest wars in human history, with a combined death toll of somewhere around 100 to 120 million. That is a legacy that no European nation is really willing to forget, and that many in Central and Eastern Europe still feel quite deeply. So does the German public, where the effort to learn the lessons of that phase of German history is still ongoing today. Modern Germany is a really different place, of course it is. But then again, in countries that are already skeptical of German military interventions, it's easy enough to look at the ongoing push for remilitarization, the rise of the hard-right AfD, and the collapse of the rules-based international order, and wonder whether handing Germany an entire continent's worth of weapons might be a regrettable decision. Nor is that the only perception of other nations toward Germany. A large share of the German public agrees with that sentiment, and modern Germany has spent generations trying to swear off militarization wherever possible. If France is a bit overly eager to take the charge, Germany has the opposite problem. It's not clear that German leaders or the German people would be comfortable stepping into that role, even if they had the opportunity. Naturally, Germany's legacy is the real elephant in the room on this topic, but it's far from the only problem that Germany faces. Berlin's the first nation on our list to not possess a nuclear arsenal, and like every other nation that we're going to discuss as we go forward, that lack of an arsenal makes it less than ideal as a leader for a continent with two nuclear nations. After all, if Germany is leading the way on defense, then at the very least, it'll be changing the strategic dynamic that Britain and France have to work within. And at worst, it could mean that a German leader or a leader from any other nation on this list draws Britain and France into a situation where they've got to consider using their arsenals against their will. Then there's Germany's domestic efforts to shift toward remilitarization. While Berlin has allotted tremendous amounts of money to that objective, its spending has been slow and its decision-making has been compromised by constant red tape and political squabbles. Its newer set of leaders, defense-orientated though they may be, are also temporary, and there's no guarantees that a new set of German leaders would seek to stall or even reverse the momentum Germany's gathered. Finally, while the German military is large and technologically sophisticated, it lacks modern-day fighting experience and lags badly behind in terms of its fighting readiness. Now, before we move on to our next country, we've got to take a quick moment and talk about something that is near and dear to our team over here at Warfronts, and that would be our premium subscription service, Fronts.co. Over at Fronts.co, our team goes even deeper into the global conflicts, the geopolitics, and the hidden influences that shape our world. Front subscribers get exclusive access to 2 premium episodes every single week, plus our entire catalogue of written articles featuring award-winning journalists and experts from across the globe. The subscription costs just $5 a month or $50 a year, and it helps us preserve our independence and expand our free offerings on YouTube. While you're checking out Fronts, be sure to sign up to our twice-weekly email newsletter, Warfronts Weekly, which is totally free to get regular updates on all the evolving stories that we're watching. Now, let's get back to the candidates to lead Europe into its fighting future. The new kid's got a gun. Look across Germany's eastern border, and we encounter a nation with strengths that counter some of Germany's greatest weaknesses: Poland. After many generations spent under the boot of Soviet overlords and German overlords before that, and many other sorts of overlords across history, Poland is in the middle of a major military reformation. Warsaw recently surpassed Paris to control the European Union's largest military, and has got no plan to stop its expansion anytime soon. Poland will spend up to 5% of its GDP on defense this year. It's targeting a peacetime military of over 300,000 troops, and it's rapidly overhauling its army, its air force, and its defense industrial base. Perhaps more than any other nation in Europe, Poland has clearly learned the lessons of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it's absolutely committed to making sure that it's never again swallowed by an expansionist foreign adversary. Poland really gives a shit about continental defense, and it's clear-eyed about its limitations and the capabilities it needs to develop. It's a nation utterly convinced that one day it will form the bulwark of a continental defense, and that it will be, singularly, responsible for holding the line even if its European allies decide to help out. It's more willing and able to change and grow than the British. It's not weirdly passionate about being in charge like France, and it's more realistic about the need to remilitarize urgently than Germany. But even though Poland's passion does matter, passion alone can't make a true continental leader, and Poland knows it. The reason that Warsaw is pushing so hard on defense isn't because it's got excess money to spend or an unusually militaristic society. This is a painful process for Poland, even if it'll be worth doing in the end. Poland isn't working to surpass established high-tech militaries like France or Germany. It's working to catch up, and it's working so fast because of the sheer size of the gap that it needs to close before it can face Russia. Poland spent many decades under Soviet authority in the 20th century, and even a few short years ago it had a military to match. It was reliant on outdated Soviet kit that the rest of NATO couldn't or didn't want to use, and its military leadership was deeply indoctrinated in Soviet rules of warfighting. Poland's defense industrial sector had potential, but it was badly underperforming, and it needed massive injections of capital plus outside hardware to have even a basic chance of remilitarization. Poland managed to thread the needle in exactly the way it needed to, but this is a military still working to learn basic lessons and unlearn troublesome old habits. Poland simply doesn't have the knowledge or the experience to use a leadership role effectively, and that reality is one that Polish leadership fully understands. In a strategic sense, Poland's focus is very different from most of its European allies. Poland is working to be a front line, facing a single, clear threat on its eastern flank, and it's not even remotely concerned with the other strategic roles that a continental leader should be able to fill: power projection, continental mobilization, or even the basics of naval warfare, which is a set of skills that Poland doesn't need to waste its limited time learning. The country's military is growing, but it's still working through its post-Soviet integration with the rest of Europe, both in a strategic and a tactical sense. Poland lacks an indigenous defense industrial base. It's reliant on the US military for many of its most sophisticated capabilities, meaning that it's beholden to Washington in a way that a European defense leader shouldn't be, and it's overly reliant on South Korea for the rest of its military. Lastly, even though most European capitals can understand Poland's desire to get ready for a war with Russia, and they might sympathize or even envy Poland's sense of urgency, there's still that little nagging voice in the backs of their heads. Poland is remilitarizing really quickly. It's turning into a military powerhouse on a continent that's been focused on peace and cooperation for decades, and while Europe trusts Poland's intentions enough to call it a partner, it doesn't trust Poland enough to regard Warsaw as a leader. Che disastro. From Poland, we move over to Italy, and while we've got to admit that Italy's historical reputation as the, quote, least of the great powers isn't a great start, the country does have a few things going for it. Like Britain and France, the Italian economy is among Europe's largest, and its military is fairly large, fairly experienced, and quite technologically advanced. The Italian Navy, although not what it used to be, is a formidable force on the Mediterranean Sea, and its defense-industrial complex is among Europe's better options between its military shipbuilding capacity, its role as a key building partner in the F-35 program, and several major defense corporations that produce Italian-designed kit. Compared to many European militaries, it does a good job with non-combat logistics, and while it's a bit behind its peers on modernization, it's working to catch up on a relatively ambitious timeline. Unfortunately for the Italian military, it comes with a lot of the same historical baggage that Germany does. Granted, that baggage is a good deal less intense, but it is still a factor, and Italy's current government, known for its far-right nationalist ideology, has been enough to generate some real skepticism from European counterparts. Politically, Italy is notorious for high turnover rates and ministerial scandals at its highest levels, and it's got a reputation for being a chronic underspender on defense. Its population is old and getting older, its military has suffered from long-standing recruitment issues, and its population's will to fight is among the lowest in Europe, just 16% among fighting-age people according to a 2025 poll, as opposed to nearly 40% who would declare themselves conscientious objectors, and over 1/4 who would endorse Italy hiring mercenaries instead. From a strategic perspective, Italy's critics could credibly argue that it's simply a poor fit to lead Europe into the future, considering that it's primarily focused on Mediterranean threats and maritime security, at a moment when Europe is gearing up for a major land war against Russia. You soy the wrong choice. And then we come to Spain, a nation that we've got to discuss if we're talking about Poland or Italy, but also a nation that we can rule out of contention very quickly. As much as European defense experts might quibble about the leadership qualities that are most important in a continental ally, those experts can certainly agree on one thing: if a nation just doesn't want to invest in defense, then it is the obvious wrong choice as a European defense leader. That problem was laid bare most recently in 2025, when Spain essentially sat on its hands during NATO conversations on increasing defense spending expectations until it got itself a carve-out from the alliance, saying that Spain didn't have to spend as much as everybody else. Spain is on track to reach NATO's original spending threshold, 2% of GDP by 2029, and it will not be attempting to reach the 5% threshold the alliance recently set, despite threats from US President Donald Trump to boot Spain out of the alliance. We could talk about lots of other Spanish issues on defense, like its political fragmentation at home, its lack of any meaningful power projection capability, its geographic location as one of the EU nations furthest from Russia, its personnel shortages, its piss-poor pay, its lack of experience, its underwhelming modernization efforts, or its internal mismanagement. But we don't have to do that because Spain just doesn't want the job. The IKEA Brigade. From Spain, we'll turn our attention to the high north, where the Nordic nations of Europe collectively offer some real military promise. Along Europe's eastern flank, the nation of Finland is among the larger and more capable fighting forces at Europe's disposal, and it's one of the few with plans already in place to reorient itself into an all-out society-wide defense against Russia. Finnish artillery, as well as its Arctic fighting skills, are the stuff of legend, and its population is among the most willing to fight across all of Europe. Neighbouring Sweden boasts a robust domestic defence industry anchored by its Saab cooperation, and it's quite capable in both Arctic and naval environments. The same could be said for Norway, a fellow high-tech, highly integrated military with a special aptitude for special operations warfare. Denmark is capable of projecting its military power to protect the island territory of Greenland, and it's among the NATO nations with a specific focus on rapid response as well as surveillance, a key area where many European nations have gotten a bit weak. But the argument for the Nordic nations as Europe's leader on defense falls apart as soon as we point out that the Nordics are several nations, not one. Even collectively, they're one of Europe's smaller population centers, and while in aggregate they boast impressive capabilities, most of them simply wouldn't be in consideration if they were evaluated one by one. The clear exception would be Finland, a nation with a unique take on its own defense, plus a combination of technical know-how and social unity that the rest of Europe could learn from. But Finland is also home to a very long front line with Russia, and while the country could conceivably defend itself against a Russian threat, it would have to dedicate so much energy to that effort that there would be none to spare for anybody else. Making matters worse, each Nordic nation may struggle to really gain the trust of the rest of Europe for varying reasons. Sweden and Finland only just joined the NATO alliance. Norway isn't part of the European Union, and Denmark was just at the epicenter of the biggest blowout between the US and Europe in the history of NATO over its territory in Greenland. Nation by nation, Denmark has been accused of chronic underinvestment in Greenland and has dealt with embarrassing recent scandals among its top brass. Norway has struggled to adapt to Russian hybrid warfare, and its armed forces face a very significant collective mental health crisis. Sweden lacks specialized personnel and is having a hard time balancing its domestic security needs with its export demands, whereas Finland's defense leaders know full well that even if they give their best effort in a defense against Russia, it'll be a miracle if they can maintain ground and aerial control across their massive front line. Windmilling at nothing. At this point, we'd be remiss not to bring up the Netherlands, a nation with a relatively small military at just 35,000 troops, but with an ability to punch well above its weight in certain areas. The country boasts a relatively large economy, outsizing Poland or any of the Nordic nations, and is working hard to double the size of its military by 2030. The Netherlands have built a highly capable air force and navy, its special operators are among the very best in the world, and its intelligence services have a well-deserved reputation as real contributors to European defense. All that being said, the Netherlands also suffers from lots and lots of problems. Not only the political instability, the experience and small size of its military, or the drastic cuts that it's made across the last few decades, but a few other more acute concerns. The nation is simply not pulling in the recruits that it was expecting to double the size of its military as planned, and it's especially short on the highly specialized personnel who take the longest time to train and replace. The country's military modernization has been hit or miss. It's missed the hard land forces in particular. Worst of all, the Dutch also have a fairly problematic historical reputation for their military, except that their problems are a good deal more recent than Germany's or Italy's. It was Dutch ground troops serving in a role as UN peacekeepers who failed to prevent the 1995 Srebrenica massacre, in an affair so catastrophic that it led the entire Dutch government to resign in 2002. Perhaps if the Dutch military were a robust, experienced, well-sized force that had notched a few successes since then, it could gain the trust of European nations as a future leader. But that's just not the case. Dishonorable mentions. As we finish today's episode, we'd like to take a brief moment to run through a few of the other nations that simply wouldn't be a good fit to lead Europe in a future conflict. Belgium, the home of NATO and the European Union headquarters, might seem like an obvious choice that we should have mentioned, but just because Belgium hosts important business on European defense doesn't make Belgium an important player in European defense. In essence, Belgium is a host for NATO and nothing more. It's widely regarded as a military free rider, spending as little as 1.2% on defense in some years, and it's completely reliant on nearby allies for security against any meaningful threat. Its own military officers describe its armed forces as, quote, not deployable. Belgium. And it's done only a fraction of the military modernization work that other European partners have accomplished. Then there's the nation of Turkey, a NATO ally and one of the most powerful militaries of the entire alliance, but really not a nation that Europe would want to entrust with its fighting future. Turkey is a geopolitical black sheep within the NATO alliance, well known for participating in military adventures in the Middle East, as well as repressive campaigns on its own soil that its European allies want no part of. The country has a recent history of advocating for Russian interests within the NATO alliance, sometimes threatening the use of its veto to do just that, and has spent a good part of the 2020s opposing Swedish and Finnish accession to NATO on the grounds that those nations provided unacceptable support to Turkey's Kurdish rivals. Turkey is in the midst of a major military rearmament, but it's intent on preserving and building up its geostrategic autonomy and explicitly doesn't want to tie itself down with regional alliances beyond the nuclear umbrella that NATO offers. In fact, Turkey is using its position as the sole arbiter of the Black Sea to build up as much geopolitical leverage as it can, and European nations rightfully suspect that Turkey's leverage could be used against them just as easily as it could be used against Russia. Across the rest of Europe, other nations are very easy to rule out. The Baltic nations each possess minuscule militaries and are exceptionally vulnerable to Russian invasion. Romania, Bulgaria, and many of the nations of Central Europe are alternately under-equipped, underfunded, underpowered, or some combination of the above. The Balkans are, of course, the Balkans, and can't be trusted not to spontaneously combust at a moment's notice, while Switzerland is as neutral as it's ever been. Greece is only recently out of a horrific financial crisis and more focused on its rivals in the Eastern Mediterranean than on the rest of Europe, whereas Portugal, well, really the kind thing to do would not be talk about the Portuguese military at all. Last and certainly not least, there's the nation of Ukraine, a country that actually does have a strong case to make on its value to Europe as both a fighting partner and a strategic leader. More than any other nation on the continent, Ukraine understands precisely what it takes to stand against Russia. It's got a massive wartime military, and it's committed to a fight on Europe's eastern front across the next generation at a minimum. It's urgently warning European leaders to get ready for war. It's tried to explain to Europe that the continent will need Ukraine in future battles, and it's built up a defense-industrial complex better suited to modern warfare than any across Europe today. But as of right now, Ukraine still remains firmly on the outside of the great European club, and while a post-war Ukraine may find itself welcomed into the fold, it's a nation that can expect many years of reconstruction before it's ready to turn its focus outward. So, who can lead Europe to war? At the end of this exhaustive list, the answer is rather underwhelming. Plenty of nations could do it. France could, Germany could, Poland could, and so on. But all of them would have to battle substantial headwinds in order to do it, and many are so preoccupied with their own problems that they aren't likely to try. We're more than halfway through the 2020s, and Europe is working to rearm itself and learn the lessons that this decade of history has brought. But when it comes to a continental leader, Europe is still sorely lacking, and even if there's no clear right candidate who should step up, the real danger is that nobody will. Thank you for watching.
This is the first morning exercise of what could be the next generation of German soldiers. These 16 to 18-year-olds are joining the Discovery Days program of the country's armed forces, currently facing a massive shortage of soldiers. Carlotta is one out of over 20 the army is trying to recruit within the next 5 days.
I wanted to join the German armed forces, and this gives me a good insight into the army. That was my motivation, to see what it's like.
They learn about drone defense and weapon systems, including witnessing the use of live ammunition. To some, a highlight.
I'm very interested in tanks and the military in general. That's also my motivation for wanting to get an insight into it.
So far, the German government has decided against reintroducing conscription. Instead, starting next year, all born in 2008 will receive a questionnaire on their willingness to serve. The aim is to boost Germany's army with more volunteers.
We definitely have noticed a significant increase of interest in armed forces and security. Young people are looking for meaningful jobs. Whether joining the German army is one of the options they are considering is still in question. And this is why they're seeking information about it.
The goal? Germany wants to recruit an estimated 80,000 more active soldiers in the upcoming years to meet the requirements of NATO. A recent study suggests that a sufficient number of young people would be willing to join the army voluntarily. Carlotta hopes that this is the case, as she is critical of conscription.
If you want to join the armed forces, then you should do it. I don't think compulsory military service is a good idea because it's better to join voluntarily than to be forced. Otherwise, you lose your motivation.
She is motivated. She wants to serve for 3 to 4 years. If she likes it, she'll stay longer.
And for more on this, we are joined by Thomas Sparrow, correspondent with our partners DW in Berlin. Good evening, Thomas. Well, how significant is this rule and what does it reveal about German military and security preparedness? Thomas.
This small detail certainly has caused a lot of controversy here in the country because it could potentially mean that millions of men would have to ask for permission before leaving the country for long periods of time. Now, the government and in particular the Ministry of Defense have since explained that they will allow people to travel abroad and they're looking to change or even cancel that small detail that has caused so much controversy here in the country. But beyond this, it is a very symbolic detail. It is a symbolic detail that has created a big discussion in the country about freedoms. You mentioned that in your introduction. It has created a big debate also about what exactly it means to have this voluntary conscription, where the German government is particularly looking to see how it can attract young people to come into the military at a time when there are very significant security and defense challenges, not only in the country, but also in Europe. So what all this reveals is that while this may be a very small detail, and in fact a detail that the government wants to scrap, it has still, let's say, fueled more discussions about how Germany can become more modern and more prepared when it comes to its military infrastructure.
And what reaction has there been to this provision in Germany and more broadly to the conscription controversy?
Young people in the country have been protesting actually because they see this as their freedoms that are being affected. They see the idea of a potential compulsory conscription. As of now, it is only voluntary, but essentially, if not enough people sign up, it could turn into compulsory. And this idea is something that for critics of the move is very problematic. They see this as a basically compulsory conscription in waiting. So that's why a lot of young people have been going to the streets to say that they disagree with this. But beyond this specifically, it is important to stress that there's a big debate in the country not only about conscription, but more generally about how the government can actually strengthen its armed forces. Because it was in 2011 that the German government, the then German government, suspended conscription. And that was at a time when the German military armed forces were facing significant problems. In fact, they were not very well prepared for challenges at the time. But it was only when the war in Ukraine began that the then German government decided it was time to modernize the military. And this move now, this discussion now is part of that wider discussion on how to modernize the military.
Now, across Europe, many governments are strengthening their militaries. How does Germany's approach fit into that wider European trend?
So it fits into that wider European trend because there are challenges that not only Germany is facing, but other European countries as well. One challenge is the fact that they believe that they cannot guarantee that the United States will help them in case of a big security situation under NATO. So essentially, European governments are trying to be more independent. And that independence, from a European perspective, means that they have to step up their own military efforts. That's one element. Second element is the belief that there are big challenges when it comes to security around the world, not only now in the Middle East, but specifically also in Ukraine, which essentially means that countries like Germany and other European countries need to be better prepared as well. So these elements, if you put them together, and they're not the only ones, reveal that Germany, but other European countries as well, are trying to tackle the issue of how specifically to improve their military preparedness. And that's something that they want to do individually, but also as a collective within the European Union.
All right. Thank you so much, Thomas, for joining us and getting us the latest from Berlin.
As part of Germany's efforts to boost its defense capabilities, lawmakers are discussing new military service proposals. Germany suspended compulsory military service in 2011. The goal of the legislation is being debated. The idea is to double the number of active and reserve soldiers to nearly 500,000. The issue has again exposed rifts within the governing coalition here in Germany of conservatives and social democrats, mirroring divisions within German society.
Is Germany going to bring back compulsory military service? The short answer to that is probably not right away. There's a big debate happening in the country right now about this, the new Military Service Act. And right now, as it stands, not even the government can agree on how to ensure Germany's defence capability going forward.
The German army must grow. The national security situation demands this, particularly due to Russia's military aggression. Not only do we need a well-equipped military force, we've been working on this for the past 2.5 years, we also need a fully staffed military.
That's Boris Pistorius, Germany's defence minister. He's part of the centre-left Social Democrats. They're the junior coalition partner in the governing coalition government here in Germany. His party favours a voluntary model, whereas the conservative CDU-CSU, that's Chancellor Friedrich Merz's party, they're of a different view.
It will be voluntary for now, but I suspect it won't remain voluntary.
What he means is that if the situation demands it, Germans who are willing to fight could expect to be called up. What's already been decided is that starting next year, men aged 18 will get a questionnaire to gauge their interest in joining the military. There are around 350,000 men who are going to get a survey, and it's hoped that around 5,000 will join the military this way. What's being debated right now is that if not enough men join voluntarily, when will conscription kick in? Germany suspended conscription back in 2011, so that would be a big change for men growing up today. But what about women? They can fill out the form if they want to, but would they even get called up?
So it is still in the constitution, just for men. It was suspended by a simple act by the majority of the members of the parliament, so it can be activated again by a simple majority of the members of the parliament, but just for men. So if we want men and women to have the obligation to do a military service, we have to change the constitution, and there we need a higher majority.
So what would make the army a more attractive option? Well, for one thing, it pays well. The Bundeswehr is also offering perks for young people, like credits towards further study courses and even help getting your driver's licence. This is all voluntary, at least for now. But with war not far away in Ukraine and Germany's increased role in contributing towards Europe's defence, it's unlikely that the debate here is going to die down.
DW's political correspondent Simon Young is following today's debate about this in the Bundestag, and he joins us now. Simon, tell us about the key sticking points in this debate about conscription in Germany right now.
Yeah, Terry, well, in addition to the usual criticisms of the government from the opposition parties, as we've heard, there's also quite a bit of disagreement within the government about how to achieve this goal of recruiting tens of thousands of new people to Germany's military over the coming years. And I think the key question is around this idea whether should there be a compulsory element in it, or can you rely on the willingness of young people to sign up even in these dangerous times? And as part of that, there's this idea that some part of this process might be a lottery to choose who should be called up. To a lot of people, that seems like an ineffective and inappropriate way of doing it. And they also suggest that it might be sort of faced with legal and constitutional challenges. I think those are some of the issues. Also, other problems loom. How quickly could the German military absorb a big influx of new people? Are there the people there to train them? Will the equipment be available? Will they have any accommodation where these people can stay? So a lot of practical issues as well, quite a lot to discuss.
With all that on the table, Simon, is it clear that the governing coalition, which does have a majority in Parliament, is it clear that it will pass some form of compulsory military service?
Yeah, the government says that it is determined to pass this new law about military service later this year so that they can start calling people up, at least inviting them to fill out questionnaires to say whether they're interested in joining, whether they have any relevant skills and qualifications, and so on. They want that to start as early as next year. There is this internal trouble over the question of the lottery, which the Conservatives say is needed as a sort of plan B, if you like, to make it clear to people that one way or another, Germany's military does need to be more effective. They say a lottery could be the fairest way of doing that. But I think what we're hearing now, both sides within the governing coalition are saying, look, we're open to whatever ideas and we're going to iron out the problems in the parliamentary process.
And how about the German public? How do they see the prospect of military conscription? What do opinion polls say?
Yeah, I think broadly there is a certain amount of support for some kind of increased or intensified recruitment process, whether it is compulsory or not. About 55% of those asked in the public at large say they think it would be a good idea. But if you break that down by age, younger people, perhaps unsurprisingly, are less enthusiastic. And in particular, the age group who would be most directly affected, the sort of 16 to 30-year-olds, less than half of those are keen to see a compulsory military service introduced. So clearly this is a debate that will continue to rage.
Simon, thank you very much. Our political correspondent, Simon Young.
Hello and welcome back to TFI Global. Germany has made a silent move in 2026 and it could change everything for millions of people overnight. Without massive headlines, without nationwide debate, Merz's aspiration to make Germany the world's most powerful army has quietly come into force as a new rule. From January 1, every man aged 17 to 45 must now get official permission before leaving Germany for more than 3 months. Studying abroad, permission is required. Working overseas, another permission is required. Even for a long vacation, permission will be required. And here's the shocking part. This is not a wartime emergency law. This rule is now permanent and even in peacetime. The change is part of a wider military reform linked to the Bundeswehr, signaling a deeper shift in Germany's defense strategy. Earlier, such restrictions were only activated during extreme situations, like war or when the country faced a direct military threat. Now those conditions are gone and the rule applies at all times. So why is Germany doing this? Officials from the Federal Ministry of Defense say the goal is to maintain an updated military register. In simple terms, they want to know where eligible men are, especially if they're outside the country for long periods. On paper, this may sound like routine administration, but critics say it raises serious concerns about personal freedom and state control. Because even if permission is generally granted, the fact that you must ask first changes everything. It creates a system where movement is monitored, tracked, and potentially controlled, and this is just the beginning. Germany is planning a massive military expansion, aiming to increase its armed forces from around 184,000 to nearly 270,000 troops by 2035. At the same time, young men are now being sent mandatory questionnaires about their willingness to serve in the military. Medical screenings are expected to follow. Step by step, the system is being built. Officially, Germany still says military service is voluntary. But many experts believe this could be laying the foundation for something much bigger. A slow, structured return to conscription, and the timing is no coincidence. Europe is facing rising geopolitical tensions, especially with Russia. Security concerns are growing and military budgets are rising. Pressure is increasing within NATO for European nations to take greater responsibility for their own defense. There's also an uncomfortable reality. The role of the United States in European security is becoming less predictable, which means countries like Germany may have to step up fast. That could explain why such a powerful law was introduced so quietly. No protests, no major political storm, just a silent change with massive implications. Even more concerning, the government has not clearly explained what happens if someone ignores this rule. No clear penalties, no detailed enforcement plan. Just uncertainty, and for millions of men, one big question. What if they don't comply? This lack of clarity only adds to the fear that stricter measures could follow in the future, because history shows that big policy shifts rarely happen all at once. They happen step by step and quietly, gradually, until one day everything is different. So is this just a bureaucratic update, or is Germany preparing for a future that many are not ready to face? One thing is certain, this is not just about travel. This is about control, preparedness, and a nation quietly reshaping its military future. Germany isn't making noise, but it is making moves, and the world should be paying attention. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below.
In Germany, as of January 1st, they're going to require men of fighting age, that's you and me, Tom, to obtain permission from the army to leave the country for more than 3 months. It's believed this is in response to concerns of a Russian attack on NATO within the next several years. Do you think we could see other European nations following suit? This seems quite extraordinary to nations that are used to peace.
No, exactly. I think what many nations across Europe, but across the West, are now having to reckon with is that post-Cold War peace dividend is over, and now new policies are necessary. Now, what previously might have seemed like emergency measures are increasingly being mooted. So, as you say, anyone of fighting age having to essentially get permission to leave the country for more than 3 months, in the context, of course, of Germany rearming more broadly, as it has been since Ukraine, but it's obviously ratcheted up in recent years, on track to hit its 5% NATO target. And particularly when you're talking about Germany, this is very significant, given the fact that even as of a few years ago, the German military was so underfunded and under-resourced that soldiers going out on manoeuvres would be given broomsticks rather than rifles. Such was the lack of seriousness, the lack of funding. Obviously, there's, to put it lightly, a very complicated history where Germany and militarism is concerned. But the fact that even the German political class are making these kinds of moves, I think shows that the penny has dropped with leaders across Europe about the new threats that confront us.
Talk to me about how the public in the UK are dealing with the situation in the Middle East. How's it affecting folk there? Our government is talking about whether or not there'll be rationing or not rationing. We're all trying to guess where things are going. Is it a similar situation in the UK, or are you guys faring okay?
Well, for the moment, it's in a bit of a holding pattern. I mean, certainly the government are trying to tamp down any concerns or any panic buying that might happen at the pumps and refusing to take any real kind of emergency measures. Earlier this week, Keir Starmer basically just announced a bunch of things that were already in place in relation to the cost of living, but hasn't taken the move, as has even happened in Australia, to slash fuel duty or to make certain measures in place to soften the blow. So I think that whereas the public clearly see what's going on and know that this is coming down the pipe, at the moment it just hasn't properly dawned either on the public or on the political class just how significant the Iran war is going to be, not just geopolitically and not just in terms of security, but also in terms of people's pockets. And coming after so many crises, so many kind of once in a generation crises, all in a series, whether that was COVID, Ukraine, or what have you. I think there's an element of kind of weariness which is set in, definitely.
It's funny, you know, once in a generation is one of the most overused phrases over the last couple of years, that's for sure. All right, we've only got a short moment left, but before I let you go, the decision by King Charles not to put out an Easter message, has the furor around that sort of died down, or are people still irate?
Well, interestingly, the royal family just put something out on social media to mark Easter Sunday. And I dare say that was in response to precisely the backlash that you heard. And I think a certain level of suspicion where King Charles is concerned, where despite being a practicing Christian, has talked of himself not just as defender of the faith, but defender of the faiths. He's a very kind of multicultural monarch. And I think that's one of the reasons that, even though it's not required for the king to make this kind of message, people felt that it hit a particularly bum note when word got out that he wasn't going to issue one this year.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that they've now put out some sort of Easter message, and well, they might. Tom Slater, I always really enjoy speaking with you. Thanks so much for taking the time tonight.
Deutschland unterstützt die Ukraine in diesem Jahr mit 11,5 Milliarden Euro. Einer unserer Schwerpunkte ist die Luftverteidigung, wie Sie wissen. Robertas, auch ihr habt früh und überproportional viel zur Unterstützung geleistet und tut dies auch weiter. Auch ihr beteiligt euch derzeit an der Finanzierung eines der Pakete mit Waffenlieferungen aus den USA im Rahmen der Pearl-Initiative. Vielen Dank dafür. Russlands Aktivitäten beschränken sich nicht nur auf die Ukraine. Ihr spürt in Litauen wie insgesamt im Baltikum noch stärker als wir, dass Russland uns in Europa Hybride bedroht und provoziert, etwa durch Luftraumverletzungen. Und ich kann dir und euch einmal mehr versichern, wir stehen an eurer Seite. Deutschland unterstützt die Sicherung des litauischen Luftraums. Unter anderem mit einem mobilen Luftwaffengefechtsstand zur Luftraumkontrolle von Januar bis März diesen Jahres. Darüber hinaus freuen wir uns, Litauen als künftige 4. Rahmennation im multinationalen Korps Nordost begrüßen zu können. Und, das darf ich persönlich sagen, jetzt nach 3 Jahren im Amt, ich persönlich, aber auch wir schätzen die enge und vertrauensvolle bilaterale Zusammenarbeit mit Litauen. Diese wollen wir und werden wir weiter ausbauen bei der Ausbildungs- und Übungskooperation, bei der Beschaffung von Material, wie zum Beispiel dem Leopard 2A8 und auch bei der Fähigkeit, und das wird immer wichtiger, das sicherzustellen, Truppen schnell an die Ostflanke zu verlegen im Rahmen des Projekts Military Mobility. Das alles stärkt unsere gemeinsame Verteidigungsfähigkeit. Das gilt natürlich in besonderem Maße für unser Leuchtturmprojekt, die Brigade Litauen. Sie wird in den kommenden Monaten in großen Schritten aufwachsen. Derzeit sind bereits 500 Angehörige der Brigade Litauen permanent vor Ort stationiert. Und Ende Januar, das werden die meisten von Ihnen nicht vor Augen haben, werden die beiden Kampftruppenbataillone Panzerbataillon 203 und Panzergrenadierbataillon 122, die in Deutschland stationiert sind, der Brigade unmittelbar unterstellt. Beide Bataillone werden nach der Fertigstellung der erforderlichen zivilen und militärischen Infrastruktur durch Litauen in Rudninkai und Rukla stationiert. An der Stelle will ich einmal mehr Danke sagen für die außerordentliche Zuverlässigkeit und Zielstrebigkeit unserer litauischen Freunde bei der Herstellung der Infrastruktur für unsere Brigade. Schon im Februar wird dann die multinationale Battlegroup Litauen der Panzerbrigade 45 unterstellt. Damit werden dann rund 1800 Brigadeangehörige vor Ort ihren Dienst in Litauen leisten. Wir sind im Zeitplan, die Brigade wächst auf und sie übt vor Ort. 2026 wird ein Jahr mit besonders intensiven Übungstätigkeiten mit deutscher Beteiligung.
Lietuva ir Vokietija šiandien kartu stiprina naują saugumo architektūrą Europoje. Turime nesustoti ir gilinti mūsų šalių bendradarbiavimą. Vokietijos lyderystė užtikrina NATO rytinio flango saugumą ir tai yra neįkainojama. Lietuvos vyriausybė, Lietuvos verslai ir mūsų visuomenė puikiai supranta Vokietijos brigados Lietuvoje svarbą. Esame pilnai įsipareigoję suteikti pilną kritinę infrastruktūrą iki kitų metų pabaigos ir šio pažado laikomės. Rūdininkų karinio miestelio pirmo etapo statybos vyksta sparčiau nei planuota. Aš jau informavau gerbiamą ministrą, kad dalis naujų Vokietijos brigados Lietuvoje statomų darbų bus baigti net 10 mėnesių anksčiau nei buvo numatyta sutartyje. Tai reiškia šių metų pabaigoje, pirmas etapas. Sausio 15 dieną pasirašėme likusias Rūdininkų karinio miestelio sutartis, tai yra didžiausias karinės infrastruktūros projektas Lietuvos istorijoje. Be to, Rūdininkų poligone kūrėme aukščiausio lygio treniruočių infrastruktūrą Vokietijos brigadai ir Lietuvos kariuomeniai, atidarome naujas šaudyklas ir tęsėme jų plėtrą. Rūdininkų poligonas įsikūrė šalia Baltarusijos sienos, greta Baltijos gynybos linijos, stiprina viso regiono kolektyvinio atgrasimo pajėgumus. Tačiau šiandien stipriausia atgrasimo žinutė priešui Rusijoje yra tai, kad Vokietijos Panzer Brigade 45 kariai jau yra Lietuvoje. Iki 27 metų pabaigos sukursime visą kritinę infrastruktūrą ir laiku priimsime likusius karius ir jų šeimas. Nebejoju, kad Lietuvos verslai kartu su užsienio partneriais paruoš tinkamas gyvenimo, tarnybos sąlygas Vokietijos kariams Lietuvoje laiku ir sklandžiai.
Hat die Allianz, die unterstützt, noch Möglichkeiten oder würden Sie sagen, man ist da bereits am Ende? Und Herr Minister, an Sie die Frage, Sie haben davon gesprochen, dass Litauen neue Antidrohnentechnologien brauche. Ist da irgendwas geplant mit Deutschland oder habe ich Sie falsch verstanden? Sind Sie da gerade in Verhandlungen zum Ankauf neuer Technologien, die Deutsche oder möglicherweise Ukrainer herstellen? Dankeschön.
Mit der ersten Frage begonnen. Die Not der Ukrainer, was die Luftverteidigungskapazitäten angeht, ist ja nicht neu. Die bestand quasi vom ersten Kriegsjahr an und hat sich seitdem trotz aller Lieferungen zwar verbessert, aber reicht eben nicht aus. Insbesondere angesichts der in den letzten 2 Jahren massiv gestiegenen Angriffe mit Drohnen, Marschflugkörpern und anderem aus Russland. Wir haben als Deutschland überproportional viel getan, sowohl was Patriot angeht. Wir haben mehr als 1/3 unserer Kapazitäten abgegeben. Mehr geht nicht, weil wir selber warten auf Ersatzlieferungen und wir müssen die Ausbildungs- und Wartungsfähigkeit bewahren und deswegen können wir keine weiteren Systeme abgeben.
Minister Pistorius, die Welt hatte unter Berufung auf die NATO berichtet über Pläne, die Ostflanke erheblich zu stärken, militärisch, auch mit neuen Waffentechnologien. Können Sie sagen, was der Plan ist und wann man erste Ergebnisse möglicherweise auch schon sieht dieser militärischen Stärkung? Und Minister Kaunas, Sie und die europäischen NATO-Verbündeten tun einiges für die Stärkung der Ostflanke. Wie verträgt sich das damit, dass Ihr Land zumindest bisher geplant hat, Transportflugzeuge in Brasilien zu kaufen?
Ich werde auf diese Frage hier nicht öffentlich antworten.
Ačiū už klausimą. Geras klausimas ir įsigijant kiekvieną technologiją, kiekvieną įrenginį visą laiką yra diskusija. Sprendimas dar nėra priimtas ir kaip sakiau ponui ministrui, artimiausiamis dienomis mes išgryninsime savo poziciją, savo sprendinį ir manau, kad rasime visoms šalims optimaliausią variantą.
Danke. Eine Frage an beide Minister. Stichwort Waffenstillstandsverhandlungen und die noch vage Hoffnung auf einen Frieden, der dann aber irgendwann abgesichert werden müsste, auch unter deutscher Beteiligung. Nun sprechen Sie nach wie vor von einem Leuchtturmprojekt Litauen-Brigade, aber manche stellen sich doch auch die Frage, überdehnt sich die Bundeswehr nicht, wenn denn ein solcher Waffenstillstand abzusichern wäre? Ist möglicherweise auch perspektivisch eine Arktis-Mission der NATO geben sollte, an der Deutschland dann beteiligt wäre? Also überdehnt sich die Bundeswehr nicht doch in the long run mit der Litauen-Brigade? Und wenn nicht, wie könnte denn vielleicht auch ein Beitrag von Litauen aussehen zu einer Überwachung eines Waffenstillstands in der Ukraine?
Wie Sie wissen, stehen ja die Überlegungen der Coalition of the Willing nicht am Anfang, aber auch noch lange nicht am Ende dessen, was am Ende machbar und gewollt ist. Im Übrigen darf nicht vergessen werden, bislang hat es noch keinen Schritt in Richtung Waffenstillstand gegeben, bei dem Russland eine konstruktive Rolle gespielt hätte. Und wir wissen, dass jede Vereinbarung eben auch von Russland mit abgesegnet werden müsste und seine Zustimmung erfahren müsste. Das heißt, auch dieser Rahmen will beachtet werden. Und ob die Bundeswehr überdehnt wird oder nicht, das hängt ja entscheidend davon ab, wer sich wo mit welchen Fähigkeiten am Ende engagiert. Und dafür ist es zu früh, das heute zu sagen. Wir sind zu allerhand in der Lage, sicherlich nicht alles gleichzeitig, aber darauf wird es auch in keinem mir bekannten Modell ankommen, sondern es geht darum, Präsenz zu zeigen, vorübergehend, für längere Zeit, aber nicht auf Dauer. Und um solche Fragen wird es am Ende gehen und so weit sind wir noch nicht.
Pirmiausia, pritariu, kad Rusija, Putinas turi realiai norėti taikos. Šiandien mes diskutuojame apie taiką, vyksta dėrybos ir tuo pačiu metu skrenda Rusijos raketos, skrenda Rusijos dronai, yra atakuojama civilinė šildymo, vandens, elektros infrastruktūra ir žūsta ukrainiečiai, net ne kariai, o civiliai, eiliniai gyventojai, vaikai. Taip Rusija pirmiausia turi realiai norėti taikos.
Vielen Dank. Gibt es weitere Fragen? Sehe ich nicht. Dann vielen Dank und einen schönen Abend.